Hi class, it's time for chapter 3. Before we start, I'll do a quick recap of chapter 2. It was pretty long. I remember there were some flashbacks and flash forwards, and we learned a little bit more about why Dominic and the dad decided to go over to the west. Okay, so the start of chapter 2, we flash back to 2 days before the fence, and we see Goethe's dad, their neighbor Kraus, and her mom, and they're having an argument about whether or not they should try to leave to the west. And the thinking prompt, the thing that we were thinking about was, why were people leaving and what made them want to do that? In the end, we see that their father decided to go to the west. Remember, their father's name is Aldous. So Aldous and Dominic decide to go to the west ahead of the rest of the family to look for a job and shelter. And then we flash forward to just after they wake up to the fence. And they're standing outside looking at the armed guards in the fence, and they realize that they've been separated. And they're wondering what's going to happen next. Okay, so chapter 3. Again, I have our thinking prompts here that are going to help us understand the story, and then some new words that we can learn from this book. Okay, let's go. It didn't take long for the government to realize that they couldn't guard the fence so heavily forever. Even with the fence and armed soldiers, people were still finding ways out. If things were bad in our city before, they would only get worse now. We all knew that. Some people made runs in the dark and literally tore their way to freedom. Others tried swimming the canals where the barbed wire couldn't reach. At least one family simply ducked low to avoid gunfire and crashed their car through the fence. So, first thinking prompt, what do the actions of the East Berliners tell you about life in East Berlin at the time? So if people were doing these things to get out, what does that mean? Nobody asked who might try to leave next. But everybody wondered. I kept waiting for Mama to tell us when we were leaving too. But she never did. Maybe she had been a prisoner here long before the fence appeared. Protests started in West Berlin. They chanted and held signs and aimed their cameras at the Grenzers, who held up mirrors to reflect the sun into the camera lenses and ruin the pictures. Remember, the Grenzers are their nickname for the guards. Fritz, Mama, and I stood near the fence and looked everywhere among the protesters for Papa and Dominic, but we could never see them. Have they forgotten us already? I asked Fritz. He smiled, as if I'd told a joke, then reached down and ruffled my hair. Papa would never forget us, Goethe. I kept staring, though every time I saw a face that almost was my father, my heart broke a little more. If he hasn't forgotten, then where is he? Fritz turned to Mama and lowered his voice so only the three of us could hear. There's talk about an apartment nearby that sits right on the border. You can enter the back of the building from the east and walk out the front doors into the west. Go straight through the fence. Mama shook her head. The government won't tolerate that for long. I don't want to be there when they come. And they did. Only a few days later, the government bricked up all the lower exits of that building, thinking they would solve the problem. But then people started jumping from the upper windows, hoping the crowd below on the west side would help to catch them. Fritz was there a week later, watching from a distance when a woman threw down a mattress and all her bedding from the third floor, while our police banged on the locked apartment door. When the police got inside, she finally leapt out, but the cushions weren't enough for the hard concrete below. The morning after, Fritz showed me the newspaper that described her as a deserter and someone with a weak mind who had believed the lies from the West. Here's a new word. Deserter is a word used to describe somebody who deserts, meaning they leave something that they're supposed to be part of. I barely breathed as I read the article, but managed to say, she died trying to get free. Why don't they care? Fritz pointed to the final paragraph, which warned the rest of us not to try the same thing. They care plenty, because they want everyone to know hers won't be the only death. His warm brown eyes met mine. Even children, Goethe. Soon afterward, the police bricked over all the windows and locked up that building and every other building that stood along the border. Then they made the decision that something more permanent was needed. The fence began to be replaced with a concrete wall that was taller, thicker, and stronger. Sharp edges of broken glass were cemented into the top to prevent anyone from climbing over it, and watchtowers were built so fewer officers could guard larger areas. With one stacked block of concrete over another, our prison slowly became a fortress, and all we did was watch it happen. So when I read that part about the wall being built, did you picture it in your mind? This big wall, this big concrete brick wall with glass shards at the top. What do you see in your mind when you think about that? With each brick, my hopes faded until nothing was left. If there had ever been a chance of Dominic and my father returning, then the wall took that too. My school teacher taught us a new song that thanked our leaders for building a wall to keep the fascists out. Fascists are another type of political thinking. I muted my glares and only mouthed the words when my teacher was looking. I couldn't bear to sing the lies. Why do you think Goethe isn't singing along with the other children in school? What would be her reasoning for not singing those songs that the teacher wants her to sing? After a couple of months, the West sent tanks to watch their side of the border, so Russia sent tanks to our side of the border. The soldiers stared at one another through binoculars, each trying to guess which side would fire first. They all had fingers on their triggers. One side has to back down, or we'll have a third world war, Mama said over dinner one night. The tone in her voice sent shudders through me, but I still mumbled, if the West wins that war, Papa could come home. Fritz kicked me under the table, but it was too late. Mama looked up with her eyes widened by dark memories. If the West wins again, then there'll be nothing to come home to, she said. Her eyes glazed over, and I knew she was remembering the things she had often described to us from the last war. The nightly bombings, the constant hunger, and millions of deaths of both soldiers and civilians. Nobody wanted another war, not even if it brought the wall down. We will never be able to leave, Mama said. The sooner you both accept that, the happier you'll be. So last thinking prompt is, why do you think the mom has this perspective that they'll never be able to leave? Think about what the narrator's told us so far about the mom and her past and her experiences with war. Why do you think the mom thinks that they'll never be able to leave? Why does she have that view? I nodded back at her, but I knew I could never again be happy here, and I refused to accept my life inside a prison. Okay. That's the end of chapter 3. Take a look at the thinking prompts, please. Think about what's happened in this chapter and try to recap it in your mind. Do a little brain scan of what's happened so far. After chapter 4, we will do a discussion together on parlay. Okay? Bye.